For Devember 13th, one change, a change to way data is handled. Hello, fellow Sublime Text fanatics. Odette Nerd here for your Devember update for Devember the 13th, a Sunday. Again, one of those weekend days. Cookies are in full swing here at the Odette Nerd household in preparation for Christmas festivities. So I only had a little bit over an hour to work on things today. And if we jump into the code, we can see that I made one and exactly one commit only. Now, the reason for that is that I had an idea for how I wanted this to work, and then as I dug in and started doing things, I realized that wasn't really going to work for what was we were trying to do. So I thought about it a little bit more and ended up with this one change. I discarded the other code because it wasn't really tenable. Now, this does require a slight bit of explanation for how things used to work, so we'll do that for our update here today. Now, previously, the magic of this whole package and how it works is that there is this class called the Network Manager. You can submit a request to it to say, I want this kind of data, like I want channel data, I want a list of playlists, I want the details of a video, things of that nature. This request object is actually just a dictionary, a very special dictionary with some extra keys in it. It's actually a class that we have in here, but it's a subclass of dictionary. And one of those objects will be put into a queue to be pulled out by the network thread, which will do the request and then invoke a callback to tell whatever requested that things are done. Now, in the middle of those things is this network manager class, and what it does is does the job of submitting the request for you to the network and then giving the result back. Now, how it actually does that is that it takes the request object and submits it into the queue, but it changes the callback that was actually given from the one that was provided to one that has itself to call that, and it will get the original callback that the request actually created. And up in the code for actually doing this, this allows us to catch the results as they come back from the network thread and then take some action on them if we want to, and then invoke the actual user callback like so. Now, one of the things that this does right now, except for one thing here that we just changed, is it caches the requests that are made. And it does this very specifically by, as we can see here, keying on the actual request object, the result that came back. Now, that means that if you make the exact same request with the exact same arguments, you get the exact same result back. This success operation allows it to immediately invoke the callback without ever having to push the request in. That's one of the things that happens down in here. If you ask for something and it's in the cache and you weren't asked to refresh it, just immediately invoke the callback as if the request just happened, so that the code doesn't even get down to the network thread at all. Now, historically, this has worked quite well for what it is that we do because the amount of requests that we make is very minimal. Get the list of channels, get the list of videos on the channel originally, then get the channel, get the list of playlists, get the videos in a playlist. This is where we start to have a little bit of a problem because when we ask for the contents of a playlist, it has to go out and fetch the details on a video. But because the requests are cached, the results are request based on the request. If you were to ask for all of the upload video playlist, it will fetch the details for all of the videos available on the channel and return them back. Now, if you were to have say, for example, a playlist on your channel that has just some of your videos, when you request that, because the request looks different, the playlist ID is different, it refetches all of the video IDs in there if there happens to be any overlap, and there will be because the upload list has all the videos in it. And the same thing can go the other way. So that's something we want to try to avoid. So we're moving actually the caching action out of this manager class and directly into the network class instead. Previously, the reason why it worked this way was a mix of how the original test code was provided, how the original version was implemented, and the idea that why put something into the queue to be shuttled over to the other thread so that the other thread can pull it out, say, no, you already have an answer for this, and invoke the callback back. We can save a little bit of time there. But the thing that I was doing was trying to gather information in a different way to be able to do this. But it turns out that that's not really good because in order for the caching to remain here in the manager has to know the underlying details of exactly what's being requested and what the results look like. And that's not something we want to do here. There's already a place that does that. It's the network code that actually makes the request. So I took all of that code and kicked it into the bin and worked on this as a proof of concept. So we only have one thing here right now. The other ones are going to be a little bit more in detailed in their implementation, so that's not something I could do on a weekend, but I can totally do that tomorrow and possibly in the live stream that will be appearing here on the channel on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific. Use the button down below to subscribe and ring the bell notification icon if you'd like to be notified when I'm going live. You can also follow me on Twitter at ODATNerd. But here is the idea. Now, this change is twofold here. First of all, we want to slowly move the caching from the place there it currently is in the manager down to the networking code. And as we transition each thing over, it has to stop caching here and start caching in the network code so that everything still continues to work the way that it does. We don't want to test things with making tons and tons of requests for several runs through in any given plugin reload. So the one change that occurs here in the manager code is that if a request is successful, cache it, but or sorry, cache the result. But if the request name isn't in here, this is what it used to do. I guess I should be saying that. I'm not used to looking at diffs, and I used to like to look them side by side. What it used to do is just always take the result, store it into the cache dictionary. But what it does now is it does that, but only if the request name isn't channel details, which is the one that we're now implementing in the other item. And the idea behind this change is as we move things over, more and more things will appear in this list until all of the requests are in the list, and then all the caching code in this can be just completely discarded out of hand. Now, over here in the networking code, we're actually doing some caching here, and this commit is already pushed up. You can be viewing it if you like. There should be a link to the repository down in the description of this devlog and all of the devlogs. Now, the first thing we're doing is in the init for the network thread, we're actually creating a cache object, and for right now, I'm just putting some comments in here to explain what the fields are going to be. Right now, when we request channel information, we always return the first channel back, even though conceivably there could be more than one channel. I don't think that's technically possible for an individual like me. I think you need to be part of a content house for that to be the case, but we want to handle that such as it is. So for right now, we're just knowing that there's going to be a key, and this cache object is going to have the results of that request. And down here in channel details, we had to do a little bit of a change here. You used to be able to ask for a specific part information, and in the YouTube API, tells the API what information you want back. You used to be able to request your own data, or if you didn't, it would be the default, and now it's just always the default, as we can see right here. That line changed. And similarly, because of that, this change that was added very recently to be able to determine for logging purposes what was looked up, because it was possible that you didn't ask for branding settings or you didn't ask for ID. So that doesn't need to be there anyway, because now we definitely know that we are asking for those things. Now here's what happens. If there is a key name channel in the cache, then we know something's cached here. So if we were asked to refresh, this is a new thing we can do inside of a request if we want. We just throw the cached data for this key completely out. Now, otherwise, we immediately return whatever data was stored in the cache in this key, which happens a little bit further down in the file. We just saw that. And then we can also say cache miss. So if the channel is actually in the cache, we either want to refresh it or return it. If it's not in the cache, then we point out that there was a miss. And these logs for debug are specifically done this way so that in a future point, we can have a debugging flag that turns this stuff on or off. It'll be easy to find these and modify the code, but I didn't want to get into that today. And down here, after the request is made, we can simply store the exact result, say what we found, and store that we cached it. But if there's an empty result, if there wasn't any channels, then we don't cache that value. We still return an empty thing back, but theoretically, maybe there's more information. So what we end up with this is the very first time you request channel information, it comes in here. It's going to say cache miss because it hasn't actually happened before. It's going to make the request. It's going to store the result in self-cache channel, just like so. The next time a call comes through, Previously, it would have been stopped at the manager. The manager would have found it in the cache. Now it's not going to be added because of these two lines that we created here. So the next time it comes through, it's in the cache. We didn't ask it to refresh, so it's immediately going to return the cache data. Now, this does incur the slight time penalty of putting things into the queue and pulling them out again in order to transfer them from the main thread to the network thread and then back. But it does make the decisions on what gets put into the cache right here in the network code, which is what's actually making the requests. Now, what's going to happen tomorrow and possibly for other days in the week, depending on how long this takes, is we need to modify all of the requests to do this. Some of them are going to be more complicated because you can ask for the playlists for a specific channel or for yourself. So a little bit more work has to be done there. We're going to be able to cache video information by ID, which means when we fetch playlist information, we can check to see if we've already got information in the cache for video so we don't have to request them again, which is going to make that much faster. But we also want to, after we implement at least one more of these, maybe two more of them, we'll have a better sense of what code is common in all of the caching items so we can start factoring it out. It's a thing that I like to do. Sometimes the idea of in your head is exactly clear enough that you can factor something out straight off the bat and start writing it that way. And other times, if you're not entirely sure what form things might take, it's a little unclear. I like to implement just a couple things and then look for the commonalities and see how I can factor it out. But that is what has happened today in Devember. We're going to be rolling back into this tomorrow and live streams on Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Pacific right here on this channel. As I said, use the bell notification icon down below. Ring the bell to be told by YouTube when I'm going live. And until then, or videos on the other channel, you will have a sublime day, I sincerely hope. I'm going to go back to cookies now.